All right, my love, go ahead and say hello to our beloved community of the Awakened Feminine Collective, and I'll just make sure all the sound is working on our end.
Hello, powerhouses. Hello, beautiful beings, souls here for reclamation, for being in your full power, and for stewarding the light on this planet. How's that sound?
It's perfect. We are locked and loaded. We're streaming. You know, the metaverse is always changing how all of these, how all of the minutia connects us in. So we are good to go. And I am, well, first of all, you and I were just chatting before this because we have been reconnected again in this incarnation. And every time we talk, we just are just like, it's just like we've known each other for lifetimes, probably because we have. And I just had you on the podcast. So let's just chat a little bit about the podcast. Let's see. I have the title here. So for those of you who are following Soulshine Radio, the latest episode this week is called Rediscover and Reclaim the Power of Your Voice with the one and only Dani Frederick. So maybe if you just want to let some of the sisters know, what does that mean to you? And we'll just give them a little taste before tuning into the full episode.
Thank you. Well, thanks again, Lindsay, for having me on. My sister from another mister in this lifetime, and my sister from 1 billion lifetimes previous. And hello to all the beautiful sisters that are in this collective doing the work to be their best selves. Vocal reclamation to me is really around coming into the fullness of your being. So for me, it's coming into alignment of your authentic soul expression in this world. And of course, I'm a songstress. And so, yes, it does mean singing, but really vocal reclamation is so much about your purpose in this world and bringing through your particular medicine, whether that's through writing or painting or singing or running a business, or communicating transparently and clearly with those you love around your needs, boundaries, desires, etc. It's, hey, how do we create this medium for our soul to come through us out into the world so that our world begins to reflect what's inside? That's what vocal reclamation means to me.
Yeah. And we were talking before this, and I usually the names of the episodes are birthed after the episode. And I was just like signing up for your vocal reclamation course that we're going to talk about. I was on your website. I was just like re-listening to the episode and gathering all of the yummy juiciness from it. And it was important to share that it was about the rediscover and the reclamation, right? Because it's like in the rediscovering, we reclaim, like that's the process. As we continue to come home and unearth, there is a reclamation of our sovereignty, of our innate power, of our authenticity. And we talk so much about that in the episode. Why I wanted to have you come on here today is because this container is a safe container where I share things that I don't share with the outside world, or it's kind of like a first time sneak peek. And we've got something exciting to share at the end, but you wanted to give some of your golden wisdom, which was not talked about in the podcast, which are the how to transmute and what are the top 5 main vocal blocks that keep us, especially as those of us in feminine bodies, that keep us from our self-expression. So if you just want to start with maybe the most important one and just kind of share your wisdom on that rediscovery and that reclamation of the voice.
Yeah. Okay. We'll start with the most important one, which I love that you said this is kind of like a behind the scenes, because sometimes I might talk about this on a public podcast, and in some ways I wouldn't. And it's probably something that actually your community is really familiar with, which is the priestess wound and the witch wound, the priestess wound and the witch wound. So these are ones that, yes, of course, there's like personal wounding that happens and we know that blocks us, right? But the witch wound and the priestess wound isn't as widely known because they aren't things that happened in this lifetime. And even if we feel like we're pretty vocal and we speak our mind, there could still be some ways where we're not relaxed, where maybe our vocal resonance isn't actually resonating with the hearts and the energetic fields of those around us because we have some locks and some blocks. And so I'll briefly mention the witch wound, which probably more people are familiar with than the priestess wound. But the witch wound is, hey, the burning times, right? It's those past lives where we were burned, we were persecuted, we were cut off from our tribes, from society, because of the medicine and the wisdom and the mysteries that we held. Whether that was being an herbalist and healing people with medicine, whether that was being in total devotion and being a mystic and bringing through prophecies, for the good of the village. And all of that didn't sit well with the church that was taking over that at that time, or, the powers at be that needed fear and control in order to steward humanity in a particular way. And so there were actually, it's a really good documentary. If you watch it, if you can look it up on YouTube, I think it's like $3 or something. It's called The Burning Times. And in that documentary, you get a really good understanding that this wasn't just the women. It's not just, hey, I'm speaking my power so that I'm going to get, cut off. I'm going to be persecuted, but their families, I'm leaving children behind, my husband, or if I speak up, my husband and my children may be killed as well.
Mm.
And so there were actually, it's estimated, this wasn't just like the Salem witch trials that we learn about, where it's like, oh, maybe like a couple hundred witches were burned. It's estimated that 6 million to 9 million people, men, women, and children, were persecuted and burned at the stake during that time. So what happens is our soul carries that memory and it begins to weave with our cellular DNA in this lifetime. And so when you have that fear of like, oh, I wish I spoke up in this meeting, or why couldn't I tell my friend the truth? It's like it comes in those little moments and the big moments, right? Of, man, I know I'm meant to birth this business, but I'm afraid to put myself out there online in this way. That can all be traced back to this witch wound where it's a very visceral feeling of, I speak my truth equals death. So
Mm.
that's the witch wound. The second one is,
Yeah. Can I share
yeah,
something?
please.
Well, we talk about this in the episode about my fear of my authentic self and how I recognize how much bigger this was than my like me, right? It was just like so much bigger than like me in this incarnation. And I think there's a relief that starts to happen, right? We're not victim of it anymore, right? Once we start to be like, oh, okay, this makes sense. It's like the grace that comes in and fills us and the compassion. But I wanted to share Rima Benario, if you're listening to this, she is a dear sister. She's who I went to Egypt with last year. She shared a song on her profile recently that was witch, like the acronym, and it was woman in total control of herself. And it's like a reframe on the witch wound. And I was listening to it today, and I didn't know that this is what you were going to talk about. I was literally dancing around my house, jamming to it, like, I'm transmuting this, like I'm flipping this on its head. And one of my mentors and spiritual teachers, Blue, she's hosted the Deja Blue podcast. She's like, I don't necessarily identify with the witch archetype. However, I am that which is needed, because there was a lot of projections in the public eye that people were calling her a witch. Because same for me, I don't identify with the witch archetype, but I know the witch wound runs deep. And we talk about this in the episode, right? Where it's like the resonance of like, of course, we all carry as women. There has been some incarnation where you were silenced. You did not use your voice. You did not have the ability to purchase a home or make your own money or leave your husband or whatever, or be silenced for a multitude of ways. And to me, that is what the witch wound truly entails. And I would actually love to hear briefly what the difference is between the witch wound and the priestess wound is, because I don't even know if I know.
Yeah. So the priestess wound is something that I actually, and I want to say it's from, oh shoot, I forget her name and I'd like to credit her. So maybe I'll comment, I'll put it in the
Okay.
comments, but she's from Australia and she does this really cool like Kundalini dance situation. And the priestess wound In the times of the temples in the Roman Empire, when they were coming in and taking over the temples, the voice of the priestess is so powerful. Oracular arts are so powerful. They open up portals, they create worlds, the seers of where the community should go, literally making magic for the good, of the community on behalf of all beings. And what happened is the Romans came in and they wanted to co-opt it for themselves. And they started abusing the priestess's power to make it work in their favor. And what happened with the priestesses is they realized what was happening and they were being used and abused in this way, and their magic was being abused, that they actually came together and chose to cut themselves off from their oracular power so that it could not be misused in this world. So you have to think of how deeply that runs is they are their oracular power. Like some of these priestesses that we were living prayers on behalf of humanity. We had to come in and say, I choose to cut myself off from who I am as this living prayer because this power is being misused and abused. And so we put locks and blocks on that. And so we can come into this lifetime with actual energetic locks and blocks on our voice that we ourselves put on there. Not only our voice, but like our Shakti womb sexual power knowing, where we really can come into like divinity and get those visions and things like that. So that's the priestess wound. So you've got the witch wound and the priestess wound, and that's how I differentiate them.
Yeah, they absolutely both resonate, and right, it's like exactly that, right? When to me, it's like the next evolution of when someone outside of self is silencing us, when the hurt gets too ouchy, when we're hurting so deeply, when there's so much fear and so much pain. This is what the body does at a biological level, is like, I'm cutting this off, I'm turning this off. And so it gets to a point where we do it to ourselves, right? We say, I'm too much, right? This is the I'm too much, I can't be seen, I need to dim my light wound. And so this is such a resonant, like, I don't know any woman that doesn't resonate with feeling that way and connecting with that. Even if you don't understand, even if you don't necessarily connect with the archetype of a priestess or a witch, and even if you don't necessarily recall any previous incarnations or you're unclear, we all know in this lifetime what it feels like to have someone cut us off or to cut ourselves off out of self-preservation, out of safety. And this is the time of no more. So let's go to number 2.
Love that. This is the time of no more.
No more. I am that which is needed. Like, I love that play on words. It's like, okay, you want to call me the witch? Great. I'm a woman in total control of herself. Moving on. Let's go.
Yes, and more. Yes. Okay. So the second one is in our ancestry. It's our ancestral DNA. So if you think of like our grandmothers, for example, even just one generation back, like we are so much freer than our parents were. And if you think about our grandparents and, what they had to go through, there's a lot of templates from our grandparents' generation where it's the woman serves the man. The woman serves the man, the woman serves the man. And don't get me wrong, if you're in a loving, beautiful relationship and you're serving your man, absolutely, because he's serving you and you're like creating this beautiful up-leveling of the divine union template, perfect. But the template I'm speaking to is that one where the woman is subservient and she puts her needs aside for her children, for the house, for whatever the husband needs. And really, people can go through in that generation entire lifetimes not even asking, what do I want? Because it's too painful to even ask that question, because there weren't many channels to actually be able to get that. And as we know, this is actually on a biological level. So when our moms were in their mom's belly, so our grandmother's belly, we were actually in our grandmother's belly because the baby in the uterus carries all of the eggs already. So everything that was happening to your grandmother at that time was actually imprinted on our cellular DNA. And that's why a lot of times in healing circles, you hear this, okay, we heal 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. And so when you're going to have kind of like these contractions in your nervous system, and it's like, what is this even coming from? Like, this is not from grade school, like getting made fun of on the playground. This is nothing. It's like, oh, it's the ancestors. So we came in here as cycle breakers to say, okay, no more. We no longer accept this template in this lineage. I'm going to clear the bloodline, and it's going to happen on behalf of me. Here we go. So that's another one that kind of flies under the radar that not many people know about or realize when they're coming into relationship with their vocal expression and just their purpose out in the world.
Mm. Yeah. And what I'm hearing from you, I think we talk about this on the podcast. I don't know. We both talked about how we were like in this black hole of a portal. We just know that we had so much fun and created so much magic, but we don't remember what we talked about because it was that amazing. We were that connected. But the first one to me is like the soul ancestry, right? And then the other one is the ancestry from this body. And so, right, as multidimensional beings, that's what I'm hearing from you, is it is very complex and very multifaceted. And so it's like, it takes the pressure off of, right, like needing to know and needing to understand it, because we may never know and we may never understand, but it's like, right, that like constant choosing of, okay, there was a reason why I chose to be here at this time, and this is the safest time to be alive. As a Western woman in particular, there's still a lot of oppression happening on the planet, which is why we chose this. I believe this is, I'm like, I chose this body, this geographic location, these parents, these circumstances to usher in this reclamation of sovereignty, of liberation, of freedom, of creative expression, of acceptance of all. And we're doing it. So let's move to number 3.
Yes. And here's the thing, because you actually hit on number 3, which we'll go into. But the first 2 we started with, it takes the shame out of it.
Yes.
Like if you're out there and you're like, why can't I speak up? Why can't I do this? Like, this is just your full permission to just let that ish go. Let it go. We don't need the story. We don't need to know why. All we need to know is you are here for a reason and you can do it. And if you're listening to this podcast or this live, you're meant to. Like, you would not be attracted to this kind of conversation if you weren't that person who's coming in to do this type of work.
Yeah. And I believe that this shift in epoch that's happening with the feminine rising is, right, the fear, guilt, and shame that is part of the masculine wounding, that again is, there's nothing to blame. This is evolution. This is us looking at, here's what's transpired and here's how we get to transmute that and shift that and transform that. And how we heal collective human genome consciousness of fear, shame, and guilt is through ourselves. It's through working through it on an individual level. And that is what creates more serenity within, that I don't need to save the world. I just get to continue to heal my relationship with myself. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront.
Sister, amen. 1,000,000,000%. I could not have said it better myself. And that's the next one, right? It's the collective templates. Like, there are places in the world where women are still property. Absolutely.
And cannot sing on the streets.
Exactly. And have to be dictated in, how they look, what they wear, how they behave. And, there's still genital mutilation that happens and all of these things. And the key code that you just so subtly but powerfully dropped in here was, when we reclaim our power, which we have the freedom to do as Western women, we actually ground the templates for the rest of the world to become free. So it's not everyone's mission and purpose to fly to those places and like be the activist that frees them. There are some people where that is aligned. But for the majority of us women, it's, where are we not taking responsibility for our own vocal authority, power, and expression? Because the world is a magnified reflection of that which is within, period, and game.
Yeah.
That is all.
I wish I knew you when I was going through so many hardships in my life, like the projection of being in leadership and being some sort of in the public role in some ways on social media and larger platforms, because this is where it took a lot of projection from the outside world when a lot of dissonance was happening on the globe, and especially in the States, around what leadership is. And that leadership looks different for all of us. And right. And this is it. What, like, some of us are on the front lines, some of us are with our families, some of us are on larger platforms, and it's all perfect. And it's right. This is why the rediscovery and the reclamation is so powerful. And I'm getting fired up about this, right? Because it's like,
so many chills.
and it's like, this is how you discover this for yourself. Because if you let society tell you this is how you lead, you're a bad person if you don't speak up about this thing, if you don't vote this way, if you don't talk about what's happening here. And it may be true that you may be in hiding. Like, for me, it was a little bit of both. It was like, I know who I am. I know how I serve. I know how I show up in love. And I was also afraid to speak up for a long time in fear of being persecuted. So that just comes with time, right? It's practice, it's experimentation, it's being like, wait, what do I believe? What is my platform? How do I get to use my voice? So I want to thank you for that, because the world is going to tell you how to lead and what to speak up about and what is right and what is wrong and what the current event topics, right? It's like, if the whole masses, we see this all the time in pop culture, something happens, how dare Justin Timberlake for not speaking up around Britney Spears? Like, how do we know that he hasn't been an ally for her, like, one-on-one for years around this? How do we know? Right? We don't
Preach.
know.
Preach, preach, preach. Here's the thing. Everyone's so busy pointing the finger of you're not doing enough, you're not doing enough, and you're not doing enough, that's the energy. It's just, we're putting our energy into you're not doing enough. And then the other side is the energy of defensiveness. So no energy is actually going into healing the things that we're mad at other people about for not doing enough.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. This is going to sound a little weird, but just hanging with me.
I love weird.
There are so many bad things that happen every day. There are so many bad things that happen every day. So just because something's in the news and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we had to do this. It's like, if someone comes at you like, well, why didn't you post about this? It's like, if you were actually tuned in to all of the darkness of the world that takes place every day, it's like, then why didn't you post about the million other things? Well, for me, it's like, I would rather not spend my time posting, but spend my time healing and also bringing my most authentic, vulnerable, loving self to everyone around me so that we can anchor more love on this planet. That is how I choose to spend my time. And I truly do not think that if you have a platform, you need to be like this spokesperson for everything. Yes, some people's mission, it is that, and that is aligned. But if we can all just say, you know what, let's all give each other a break and do the best we can. Yeah, that's when the world changes, not when we all have the perfect posts saying that we're so virtuous and yada, 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 and we gave money here and we give money there. That doesn't change the world. How you show up, who you are, and the vibration that you're emitting from moment to moment is how the world changes.
Yeah, we talk about I'll talk about that a lot on the episode too, is the frequency holder of the priestess archetype. And you so eloquently share, your wisdom there as well. So thank you. All right, we're going deep here. What's number 3?
We are.
We're like, oh my gosh, there's clearly work that Dani and I get to do together. We are like, so this is how I look at it. It's like, we are different instruments in the divine orchestra carrying a very similar tune. Like, it's not every day that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can say this and know that we may not agree on the same things, but it's very similar resonances of like understanding what it means to be a human, what it means to be spiritual, what it means to be in leadership, how to heal, right? It's like, I just feel a sense of serenity, because a lot of times I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like nobody gets me. I feel like there's this rose-colored glasses Pollyanna view. And the thing is I was still showing up this way, even when I felt like I wasn't understood, because I did so much healing to just be myself. And then what starts to happen is we start to magnetize the people who, like, you have been doing this for years on your own journey. And then we cross paths. And then it's like, yes, like, oh. And we talk about in the episode, like, we F up all the time. And that's it, the humanity bridged as the divinity in one, and how all of that experimentation and trying things on and screwing up and saying the thing that we're like, oh, I wish I didn't say that, and feeling the wound when we thought we cleared it, like all of that is what helps us, I believe, have this view of the future, have this lens to be able to hold what's possible for humanity. So I am like, and of course, we have sisters all over the world that we're reconnecting with, but it feels so yummy when you just feel it. Like, and I want to say this really quickly, because been a couple of times earlier today before we went live, and as you're speaking, where it is like, I connect with you and I'm like, I know her. I see your face and I'm just like, oh yeah, no. Liz is like, it isn't just we've connected a couple times on Zoom now. Like, I know her. And it'll be a certain facial expression or something that you say, or a mannerism, and it's just like, remembrance. Remembrance
is here. I mean, what can I say? Ditto. And because for me, my experience of it is, it's the same. I'm like, oh, I get to talk with Lindsay today. Like, the way she forms her words, and I feel like she just understands me, because it's the same thing, right? Like, there's a part of everyone's journey where you do need to be a lone wolf. It's just part of the initiation, where you don't feel understood by anyone, and you're not even sure if you understand yourself.
Like, I'm like, am I making
the true
this up?
wisdom. Yeah, and the true wisdom is admitting, like, one of my teachers, Maren Bach-Antonsen, who we spoke a lot about, brought forward this mantra, who she heard from a forest monk, which is something along the lines of, I know nothing, I know nothing, I know nothing. And that mantra is actually so freeing to just be like, we don't know, we do not know. I mean, there's a whole spectrum, science has proved this, of things that we can't see. Like, if the spectrum is here, what we see is this. For what we can hear, this is what we can hear. Here's the spectrum. It's like, we see dogs can hear, smell. It's a whole thing, right? There's so much out there that we just don't know. And can we, like, humble ourselves and free ourselves from carrying this load on our back of, like, I need to be perfect and I'm the expert and here's what leadership is. And I do want to just double tap on what you said about leadership, because it's so, yes, it's so perfect. Like,
we're just going for it. As long as you've got time, we can we're good.
You're welcome. We're doing a second podcast episode.
We're doing a part 2. I'm dropping it next week. Like, part 2 is coming, Brendan. Just letting you know now.
Brendan, so much love. Yeah, because look, like, we have a couple more to get through, but this is important. So it's been, what I've been feeling lately is like, my actual entire journey is unplugging from the patriarchy and plugging into whatever the truth paradigm is, whatever the divine paradigm is. And when I say patriarchy, I don't even, like, when I think of that, I don't think of male. Like, yes, there are examples of, like, male control, what have you. That is true. That is real. But for me, it's really about the patriarchy hurting all genders, and it being about fear and control and proving your worth and competition, and basically a system that's designed to make you feel unworthy. So you're constantly distracted of, how can I be better? How can I start this business? How can I buy more things that make me feel good? All of that kind of jazz, right? And when we can unplug from that, because sometimes on the path, and I've been guilty of this, sometimes it's just part of it. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel my soul coming online, and now I want to go do, like, my soul purpose in the world. And one of the traps that we can fall into is, we're doing our soul purpose in the world according to patriarchal rules. We're doing it at the expense of our health. We're doing it from a perspective of, I've got to compete, of the perspective of, I've got to do. And so, and this is it doesn't change overnight, right? Like you said, like, sometimes there's still parts of me that I'm like, oh, wow, I'm still really plugged in there. I'm really plugged in. Let me come home to myself for a moment. Because the true change, again, happens within. And then what you'll notice is, spirit begins to move your body and say, please birth this. Please birth this. And it's not about getting validation or having eyes on it or selling something, even though that is part of it, right? We are in a material plane. We chose this realm, and we chose these structures, and we chose these rules of the game. However, that's not the primary. The primary is of, this felt so good to birth from my being, and I feel like it's a piece of me.
Yeah. I call that
Regardless.
divine will.
Yeah,
'Cause it's
yeah.
a different energy. It's like emptying so that the divine life force propels you. And that's why people are like, how do you have so much energy? And right now I'm being transparent now and on the podcast. And when I talk to people, I'm like, I'm tired, but it's not tired of from burnout. It's tired from a day well spent. Like I am in my business. I am making new offerings. I'm selling my house. I'm doing all of these things to nourish myself and take care of my body. And I am like creating little pockets of sacredness and just like walking meditations and just breathing and create. It's almost rewiring me to be in the ritual of life, like preparing me for even more to hold. And so that's the difference. And it does it. And there's still moments where I notice like, oops, I overextended. Oops, I filled my calendar too much. Oops, I said yes when I should have said no. And they're fewer and far between. And now I just notice like, oh, wow, I feel different. And this is why. Feedback. Okay. Now it's a new moment. So, and this is why sisterhood is so powerful, because it's like everybody comes online in different ways at different times. And we always think that it's supposed to happen faster than it does. But I promise you, it just all of a sudden, it's like I call it like the spiritual gym membership. Like you just keep doing the spiritual hygiene. You keep showing up, even if it doesn't make sense, even if you don't get it. And then all of a sudden, one day you're like, oh my gosh, I feel good. I feel different. There's things happening and I'm like not crumbling and I'm taking care of myself. And it just because of all the little things that you do to just keep showing up, to keep saying yes, to keep leaning in. And next thing you know, you're like, oh my gosh, this is evolution. I did it. And then there's the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I always say miracles happen in the micro moments.
Totally.
It's so easy for us to think like, oh, it's the big thing, like quitting my job or doing XYZ. And yes, those can be necessary and aligned actions. But the true transformation is showing up every day and just, okay, the micro moments, the micro
Yeah.
moments. Micro moments. So wherever anyone is at who is listening to this, like just know you are so perfect. You are so supported and like you've got this. And we've all been there and we all will continue to be there. Like life is a cycle. It's not a linear upwards trajectory. It's spiral, spiral, spiral. And then when you're on that spiral, it's kind of like roller coaster.
Roller coaster.
Yeah. So it's not about being like having only good feelings. It's about, I loved that you use the word or the phrase ritual of life. I'm like, yum. It's about coming into the beauty of each moment, regardless of what's being presented in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yummy. All right. Part 2 of the podcast,
Yeah.
number 3.
Number 3. Okay. So this is what we've already kind of talked about. So this is good. It's
Perfect.
societal conditioning, right? So this is, we've talked about kind of like the leadership models and how that's really conditioned us. But if you think about it, really from the time that we are in this world, we are evaluated and we are told like this is what perfection looks like, right? We're in school, we've got to get good grades. Oh, did you get an A or an F? And there's a hierarchy there. Oh, A is better. I got to look this way. Oh, like when I raised my hand and spoke in class, did like the other kids laugh at me or did they not? Did the teacher give me good feedback or did they give that other kid good feedback? Right? So from a really young age, we are just conditioned in society of this is what we expect of you. And if you do not fit that mold, then you are less than. So then what happens in our psyche is we're constantly thinking about how do I get to package this expression so that it lands well, so that it gets praise, so that it gets the A+. And what can happen then is if we don't feel like, oh, this isn't packaged, this isn't right, this isn't it, boop, we just put the lid on the creativity and we move on with our day and we start to cut ourselves off and cut ourselves off and cut ourselves off until we're like a dry wellspring. Because the thing about creativity and expression is one of its main tenets is being uninhibited. It's like that wild woman archetype coming back of like, you will not constrain me. Like, see my beauty. It might not be the model of beauty that we've created as humans, but it is beautiful, and she will be heard, whether whether now or in the future. So we might as well just start doing the work now.
Yeah, to me, the word is like intoxication. That's been my word, is like that liberated, intoxicated, like, where can I be more, like, where can I allow more boundlessness to happen? Like, where, like that uninhibited, like, where can I be louder in the bedroom? Like, where can I like be chanting outside or naked around the fire in my backyard, or right? Like, I'm always naked. And my husband's like, all the windows are open. And I'm like, yeah, all the windows, like, I'm sure people have seen it. Like, just being like, who cares? Right. And I've noticed with my light language, which I've kept very private, and it's still something that I keep very private, and I'm working on, like, where can I self-express? Like, there's a part of me, I did it when I was doing a lot of my embodiment, when I was starting to be seen in my embodiment work. I would show movements online, and then it got to a point where I was like, oh, I'm not afraid of this anymore, and I didn't need to. Like, it was like I was doing it to practice. So I know there'll be a point with, like, maybe I'll do a light language transmission on my Instagram for my whole family to see, and anyone to see, and strangers to see, and call me a witch and project onto me and tell me they don't understand. And then it's like, once I've done it and I'm like, oh, I still feel good, and like, I don't have to take that on anymore, and I've worked through it, then it's like, maybe I will share more, and maybe all of a sudden it opens up a whole new line of business for me, or offerings, or maybe it's just a place to practice. So I use containers like that to just be like, this is me. This is something I do behind closed doors to heal, to connect with source, to be myself, to be in creativity. And the more that I let myself, it's like this resolve in my body, like the deepest of surrender, that then the like movement happens and the sound comes out, and like the ecstatic experiences begin to happen in my life. And it's a very paradoxical situation, because there's those moments of like the priestess wound in the witch room of like, I'm literally going to die if somebody sees me uninhibited and intoxicated with the spirit of life. I've had those moments. And then there's a part of me that's like, this feels so true. This feels so good. Like, oh my gosh, I want more. And so I'm constantly in this play, and I've learned to just be with it, with all of it, and love all those parts of myself and get curious about it.
Girl, that's the thing, right? It's about loving all those parts. And you hit on something so perfect. It's about who we're becoming. Like, spirit doesn't really care. Like, look, spirit's in charge. There's not like, you're not doing this for service. Like, yes, I'll be like, this is my service, but I'm not actually doing it for anyone else but who I'm becoming and myself. Like, let's be really clear. If you're like, I just serve and it's not for me, like, there might be something you want to look at.
Yeah.
The spirit doesn't give a shit. Okay. It has different ways of working and vessels. It doesn't need you to be out there being like, I'm serving everyone. So I share that for two reasons. The first is, you don't need to be in the public eye or sharing every aspect of your life in order to be like, yes, I'm empowered in my voice. It's really about, in whatever way your life looks, do you feel like you're being more true and more authentic and more vulnerable and more connected each and every day, little by little? Because it's one thing if you're just it's a system that's in tandem, right? So there's the doing the action even when we're afraid, right? So that's building our courage musculature. But if you're not actually taking a second to say, why was I so afraid? Let me look at that part and heal it. You're going to get pretty exhausted, because every time you're going to have to work up this courage to overcome, and work up this courage to overcome, and work up this courage to overcome, where you might just say, I don't want to fucking do it anymore. I'm tired. I'm tired. But when we can pair that courage and that doing with, okay, what's this like wound in me that is afraid, that maybe needs to be held, that maybe I just need to cry and just know that I'm going to be safe. And then what you'll notice is, next time you do that expression or that action, it's a little bit easier. You might still need courage, but it's not so much of like, let me gain all of this so like this rocket ship can take off. It's this system that's really this infinity symbol of growth that we all go through. So
I'm like, I'm making noises over here. I'm like, I'm digesting it.
I'm the same. I'm always like, that's so good, yummy.
Like,
And I'm like, you know,
yum.
probably like, can you not?
And that's another thing. Like, now my husband he doesn't, it's like, it took a while for him to be like, what's wrong? Like, I would sigh, or I would be like, or I would make a noise, and he'd be like, are you okay? Or, oh, there she goes again. Or like, I mean, I was just having these deep sighs, and he'd be like, what did I say? He would think it was about, what did I do? And I'm like, what? I'm just over here. Like, I'm just embodied. Like, right as I started to come online, I see it with my 2-year-old nephew, like, like when he grunts and when he gets up, and like, we turn that off, like the visceral animation of our bodies. And one thing that I'm hearing from you that's a practical tool that I think could support the women in this space is, what is your edge? Like, my edge was to do the thing on social media and just like get out there, because my soul very does much want to be in the public eye. My human self doesn't, but my soul does. And so it's like this constant piece of, what is my edge? Maybe your edge is putting the windows down and singing at a stoplight. Maybe it's just singing in front of people. Maybe it's, right? Like, what is your edge in this moment to self-express and to start doing something that feels good, that maybe somebody else might think would be weird or question or not understand? And then the second piece that I've never connected before that started to connect is what I'm hearing from you about, like, having the fear and doing it anyway. Like, when there's a lot of unhealed masculine centric ways, like you said, of showing up and doing business, that it's like push, 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 push. And like you said, the feminine, like, now I'm realizing it's like, once we integrate the feminine back in, heal the masculine, it's like, yes, we are doing this. This is divine will. And right, it's always in service to our healing, to our heart, right? To who we came here to be. And it's that constant dance. We serve the whole through serving ourselves. That's it. So thank you for crystallizing.
Every time you open your mouth. So thank you. Vibrational massage that I get every time we get to come on together.
Right back at you, sister. Oh my gosh, podcast part 2. Okay, number 4.
Yes. Okay, well, here we go. So we've gone over, I just want to look at my notes here. So we've gone over past lives, the witch wound and priestess wound. We've looked at ancestral DNA. We've looked at collective templates. We've looked at societal conditioning. So we're going through number 5. This is the last one for today. There are more, and we talk about that in the vocal reclamation e-course. But the last one is the most obvious one. It's our personal wounding, right? It's when we were told we were too loud, or we talked too fast, or we're not cool, or one that I always come back to is so funny. It's so little, and I always feel like I healed it, but I'm like, oh, there's still some remnants. Is I was walking down a hallway in 3rd grade, and I had blue boots, and my name is Dani. It's short for Danielle. And these boys were like, you have a boy's name, and why are you wearing blue boots? Your boots should be pink. And it's so interesting. I'm just getting this in this moment. Then in high school, I remember I was hanging out with like 2 friends, a boy and a girl, and the boy was like, Dan the man, Dan the man, Dan the man, or something like that. So it's just these things, right? Whatever that wounding is, where it just makes you constrict and think less of yourself in some way, or not want to share, or you feel bad, or you feel shame, or you feel embarrassed. And then there's also just modeling from our parents, right? And that could be, maybe you had a parent that was really quiet and didn't get their needs met, or maybe you had a parent that was actually really vocal, but wasn't actually aligned in their vocalization. And it kind of like was throwing out daggers and creating a lot of chaos. So we learn a lot about our world and how to be from our parents. So a great question to ask yourself is like, what did I learn about my expression from my mom, from my dad? And it'll give you a nice key into where you might want to look to liberate some emotion and make yourself more free. Because I do believe that we choose our parents to come in here. Our parents are absolutely perfect. We say, I want this trauma from you, and I want this love from you, and I want this, and it all really supports our eventual initiation and going through and moving through that wounding so that we can know ourselves as the powerful, innocent, untouchable, limitless beings that we are.
Mm.
We learn through opposites. So if we want to
Mhm.
know what empowerment feels like, our soul's going to design a really disempowering situation so that we learn all the tactics, strategies, knowings, beings, liberations of feelings that it takes to get to that empowered state. It's not, oh, I've had this easy life and so I'm so empowered. It's knowing intimately what disempowerment is what gives you empowerment. So, our souls have really fun ways of designing initiations and challenges. So whenever I'm stuck in something, I always just ask, if my soul perfectly designed this moment, this clusterfuck of a moment, what am I learning now? Like, what am I being asked to embody? So
Mm.
that's what I would say there.
Oh, I love
And
it.
that's all
Yeah,
5.
that's all 5. So I have them here. So, okay, the witch wound and priestess wound, ancestral DNA, societal conditioning and constructs, collective templates, and personal wounding. And again, like I've been doing a lot of this work for a long time and healing and, serving, right? I've served because I know it's like I'm just sharing what's worked for me. And then other people are like, I kind of want a little bit of that. I want to learn how that works for me. And what I love is I have 2 clients who are now starting and initiating their own embodiment programs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, right? This is how it works. Like it was opening that doorway of those key codes, like of that wisdom that already resides within them. And they're now creating their own templates and calling in their people that they then get to heal, right? But it's through the very process of them continuing to be grounded, to be in their bodies, to connect, to be in this form, which so many of us, once we connect spiritually, people think that we're supposed to leave or I don't want to be here. And it's like, no. We bring that back in and we incarnate that back into the body. That's all we're doing. So I love the 5, and I know there's more, but like it helps me. I think what it does is it helps the mind understand the complexities, which I love, right? Because it's always like we understand what the mind and we bring it back into the body. And I think we start to recognize if you are feeling shame, if you are feeling like, why does this keep coming up? If you are feeling like, oh my gosh, I've done so much work, I've hired so many mentors, I paid all these things, why is this still happening? When you see these 5, and of course there's more and more, we understand the intricacies of Source consciousness and the matrix that is literally co-creating this entire experience with all nearly 8 billion people on the planet. And the divine orchestration that's at play here that is so unfathomable for the lower octave mind. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for crystallizing things for myself and deepening just some things that I've been moving through. And so I'm going to put the podcast, part 1 of the podcast that we recorded that's been released this week. You'll hear more about how Dani and I connected and reconnected in this lifetime, about your awakening journey, about how you started to enter into the world as an emerging artist, as a spiritual artist, and dropping these high frequencies through the form of music in the episode. And you also have a beautiful offering that I signed up for, and that you have a promo code for our beloved community as well. Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. Yes. So I do have an e-course coming out to help with all like this very thing, what this whole conversation has been about. Because for me right now, my directive has been very clear from my spirit guides. They're just like, get this out, do it right away, here we go. And I'm like, okay, because there is a vocal reclamation. That's why I called it that. There is a vocal reclamation happening on this planet now. It is something that we are all being asked to do and tasked with. And some of us will choose it and some of us won't. And there needs to be tools to help with that. And so I put it at a very accessible price because, again, my guidance was just get it out. So right now you can get it for 30% off as a pre-order. It does go live May 1st. And at that time, it'll go up to $45. And really, when I think about the content that's within it, one day I will like reproduce it, so to speak. And it will be in the triple digits. Like that's where it's at. But right now it's just, hey, it's about the ministry. It's about like calling in the army of priestesses. That doesn't mean that I have to know you. It's just, hey, let's all just know that in the ethers, we're all like, yeah, bitch, I see you. Hey, girl, do your thing. Hey, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. So this is my piece of it. And so it's really for the woman who wants to come into more of her authentic self and know what it feels like to embody more of your true self. So to be clear, because it is called Vocal Reclamation, I am she who sings. It's not a vocal tech, like a technique course. It's not going to be like, now let's do scales. It's really about, I am she who sings my soul expression into the world. I am she who wields my power to create my reality. I am she who speaks her desires and has her needs met. So it's all about what all goes into the soul content of the voice, to the relationship with the voice, so that we can have a really strong, solid foundation for our voice to begin to organically open up and blossom as the rose. And we can start to naturally bring really beautiful sound through that actually has resonance with things around us to actually bring spirit and light into form.
I love this. And I feel the same way. I feel like you came into my world to support me in this, because there's definitely something happening with, I used to play guitar, wanting to pick that back up again, starting to, like, I just have this vision of my basement in my North Carolina home. And I just picture like either this concrete raw floors with plants everywhere and a lot of light, or hardwood floors and there's this whole corner of instruments and like floors to roll around in with a stripper pole, with a huge rug that I can like just, I don't know, I just want to roll around and I'm like, I want to play my instruments and I just want to like go down there and just decide what feels good in that moment, to be in the intoxication of life. And I feel like I've hated my voice historically in the past. And I never considered myself a singer. And, you know, like so much of this light language, there's a lot of singing that's happening. There's a lot of like humming that's starting to happen. And it was very confusing for a while. Like, what is this? When my light language came online, I've never shared this in public, I could not stop for like 36 hours. And my husband, I had to, it was like the first piece was like, is my husband going to leave me? Like it was that level of fear. And I will never forget him looking at me and being like, I'm just so emotional, because he's like, I could watch him not judging me, but also not understanding, but there was no judgment. And then he was just like, babe, I don't get it, but I don't care. And it was so fast. I couldn't even keep up. Like it felt like Morse code. Like it was like, and then I started judging my light language. Like all these other people have these beautiful like things that they do. And it sounds like this, and mine sounds like, I don't know what's happening. And I know that there's a deepening here, and I can tell on the podcast, and people have said to me, your voice is shifting. And that happens, right? As our DNA is shifting, as we're evolving, our voice, of course, it's all the language of the universe, right? It's sound, it's energy, it's frequency, it's vibration. Of course, as we're upgrading, that's why we start to look different. That's why people say, how is it that you're 36 and you're looking like you're 26? I'm getting that all the time now, because on a cellular level, we are shifting. Our voice is changing. Our auric field is shifting. We are magnetizing the people in our life, like Dani. We're magnetizing what is meant for us as we continue to lean in and say yes. And I'm scared shitless. I'm like, what is this whole voice thing? What is this whole music thing? Like, I'm afraid. But then there's a part of me that's like, but what would it look like if I just was in my basement and no one was watching and I was singing and I was playing? And what is that going to look like? What is that going to feel like? And so I'm excited to do your course because like there's medicine here for me. It is my edge. Like there's some, maybe I'll sing on freaking YouTube one day and just not give a shit.
Yes. And you hit on something so profound. It's like how we judge and shame ourselves, right? And that constriction. And you're exactly right. I have another friend who does a podcast, and we caught up recently, and I was like, your voice has dropped. He's male. I'm like, your voice has dropped 2 octaves. And I feel like you could be on that app that like reads the bedtime stories. And it has been after a ton of like major initiations and healing he's going through. So yeah, this is definitely one of the key codes of building that musculature of courage, of compassion, of non-judgment, of releasing shame, all of those goodies that when you go through something like that with your voice, that musculature doesn't just apply to your voice. It now applies to every other area of your life, and you've just upgraded and up-leveled your reality.
Yeah, and I believe there will be eventually a world where we won't need language again anymore.
Beep, 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 boop, boop, bop, beep.
Exactly, like
Beep, beep, beep.
And the most important piece before we pop off, hello, Spotify single Priestess Reawakens. Let's drop that in the comments below.
Yes, please. And I forgot, for the e-course, you get an extra 10% off for being in Lindsay's community. It's with Soulshine 10. So you can get a super, super deal. And yes, the Priestess Reawakens is on Spotify. And this is an absolute key code. And what I mean by a key code is these chants that come, they're dropped in when I'm in a devotional space, and I channel them. So they're encoded with light. And when I say the word key code, I believe that there's dormant templates within all of us. And when you hear a key code, that dormant template will begin to activate and come online for you if it's in highest and best to do so. So you don't have to worry about like, do I want this? Do I want this template activated? If it's meant to be, it will be if it's in your highest and best good. And so the Priestess Reawakens is exactly what you were saying at the beginning. You said, rediscover and reclaim your voice. Why? Because it's not the first time you've been powerful with your voice. We're in a process of remembering and reawakening because you've done this in other lifetimes. Just like we've been persecuted in other lifetimes, we've been absolute powerhouses in other lifetimes. And we get to come back into that and really use our voice as medicine for ourselves and for the world.
Yeah, and then it's like, right, we start to love our voice. We start to love the way we look. Like when you were talking about your name, your given name, and the boots and all the things, my hair, like I'm a strawberry blonde, and for years I dyed it because I was made fun of. I like there wasn't many people, like kids my age, with strawberry blonde hair, and I shut that down. I begged my parents at a young age. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't take this anymore. And then it was several years ago that I'm like, let me try to grow this out and see what it looks like. And then I went through a whole, like through my awakening journey, I'm like, what the hell? I am like only doing any beautification if I'm like so excited about it and it like accentuates my inherent radiance and beauty. And now my hair is like one of my favorite things about me. Like how it's different and just like how it's my natural hair. Like it was like the reclamation of like, this is what I came in with, and it is different. And I get to embrace that aspect of me that came in with this, but it's like, I needed to go through the shame and the judgment and the being made fun of. And like, you don't want to be different. You want to look like everybody else, so that I could unlearn that and start fresh. And the same thing is happening. Oh, lots of notifications happening on this post now in the live. So messages are coming through, but like, this is it. And it just happens in phases. And it's like, if I wouldn't have gone through that rediscovery of my inherent nature, my pure nature, and reclaim that aspect of my being, right? That it's like that initiated what else? What else? And I feel that you get to support me in this vocal reclamation piece and what that's going to do again for me and the people that I touch just through being myself, which is so easy. So
Yummy.
here we go again, just being like, I don't want it to end, but
I know,
thank
right?
you. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any final words you want to leave our beloved community with?
I just want to say thanks for doing the work and thanks for showing up. Even if you feel like you're doing nothing, the fact that you're even tuning in, that you even requested to join a Facebook group that's called The Awakened Woman, means that you are putting forth your heart and your love. And yeah, I think it can be really easy to feel alone and to feel like, what the fuck is this never ending? And I just want us all to know that, like, oh, it's going to sound so corny. Why is this the words I'm being given? I'm like, damn it. I'm like, anything is possible. But it's true. Anything is possible when we can show up in our commitment and our devotion to our hearts and to each other. I'll leave that.
Yeah,
So
see,
thank
that
you.
wasn't corny at all. That felt so good.
Okay, good.
We alone together. That's what's been dropping in with my guides as of late. We alone together. Nobody can do the work for
Oh,
us.
I love that.
Yeah.
I get chills. You can see me squirming like this whole time because every time you talk, I'm like, chills, chills, chills.
Right. Like nobody can reclaim my voice. Like Dani cannot reclaim my voice for me. However, I'm going to do it. I'm claiming it. I'm saying yes. I know that there's more here for me. And Dani dropped into my world literally only like a month ago, I feel, and rocked my world in the best way. And now I get to be inspired by her because she's gone through this and she's moved through this and she's now creating from what she's learned and what she's transformed and what she's transmuted. And you're having a lot of fun in the process, which we talk a lot about on the podcast. So
yeah, and I
thank
promise
you.
we're wrapping up, but I have to say this.
We're never wrapping up. We're going to pitch a tent.
Forever in conversation, whether it's vocally or just in the ethers. It's always an equal exchange. Like, even we might not realize it, but it's always an equal exchange. Like with you, I get to feel like, wow, I don't have to like, sometimes I'm like, oh, like marketing, like I'm, I'm like, I don't know. And it's just like, I just get to come here and speak my truth. And I feel like you just reflect it and create this safe space. And it's just like the way you feel served by me, I feel served by you. And it's the same thing. I was just like one more example for the women out there. I was just facilitating at a retreat, and one of the attendees came up to me and she was just like, she needed some one-on-one time. And she was like, I was afraid to come up to you because I don't want to pull you away. Like, there's a lot going on, but we have multiple facilitators there for this very reason. And right, it's that burden wound that we all feel. Oh, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to bother you. And honestly, I was so happy because I am like more of an introvert and I had kind of reached my limit of like being around so many people. And I was like, yes, let's go do some one-on-one healing. Hell yeah, girl. Yeah. And we had like the best time. It was so nourishing for me. It was so nourishing for me. And so it's like when we think like, oh, I might be being a burden or something, things don't cross paths without there being an equal exchange, even if on the surface it seems horrible, just going back to what we talked about of like initiations that our soul will design for us. So
yeah,
I
totally.
will leave it at that because I will go on till 5 and I gotta go.
I'm like, and I'm turning into a pumpkin because it's the end of my workday here. So thank you so much, love. I'll continue to drop everything in the comments. Please reach out to Dani or myself, and you'll be hearing more from us and all these future fun collaborations that are forthcoming.
We love you all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Much love.